Well, welcome to the first episode of Cocktail Party Economic Conversations. This series is going to riff off of the book by the same name, Cocktail Party Economics, and every chapter will cover a major economic concept. And the normal format will be myself, Evie Animate, and my writing partner, Richard Maranta. You want to say hi, Richard?
Hi, how are you?
And we will typically interview a third person who's a guest who is working in the area that sort of covers that concept. But this episode is about introducing us. So it's making introductions, and it seemed a little silly for Richard and I to introduce ourselves. So we're going to hand over the interview control to someone I know very well, Stefanie Sharp. She works at the University of Guelph in Alumni Affairs, and she's going to talk. She's going to lead the conversation and ask the questions that hopefully you're interested in finding out more about with respect to Rick and I.
Great. Thanks, Evie. So, hi, everyone. As Evie mentioned, I'm Steph Sharp. I'm the Senior Development Manager for the Lang Business School. And I also am a grad from Guelph. I did my undergrad in the Bachelor of Commerce program, Marketing Management. And later on, after I've been working for a couple of years, I ended up doing the MBA as well. Highly recommend if anyone wants to ask questions, feel free to reach out. So we're just going to jump right into it. And I think that this is a really unique way for us to get to know Evie and Rick a little bit better. I know Evie really well. She knew me when I was born. Her and my mom are really good friends, and I grew up being really good friends with her son. So lots of long-term relationships that we have and share together. So I'd love to start off the conversation by just learning about what inspired you to write this book.
I think what happened was I was going to a women's conference and somebody started asking questions about free trade. And I just realized this was going to take a while. And then one of the women said, "Oh, this stuff makes me feel so dumb." And I realized she was a really smart person. And so I wanted to be able to communicate economic ideas in a way that would help people who are really bright, but just don't know anything about the field to learn more about economics and kind of have the framework, not just the sound bites about economic ideas. So that was kind of the first thought. And so then
Mhm.
I got a hold of Rick. He's a really good friend, he and his wife, and pitched this idea. And he was interested in, I mean, I might as well tell the story up front of how this happened. I was quite worried about writing on my own because when I was in high school, um, my English teacher, I took two English courses with him and I loved them. And so I thought I would go to another university, which will remain nameless, and
Mhm.
take English. And so I went to talk to him about it and I said, "I'm looking at taking English." And he went, "Oh dear, no." And I went, "What?" And he goes, "Well, do I look like a football player to you?" And he was this short man. I said, "No." And he goes, "And you're not an English major. You're basically illiterate." And in the back of my head, I had this joke that sort of was sitting there, and I went, "Oh no, my parents were married." And so then he looked at me like, really proved the point. But I was sort of mad, but that it affected my going forward. I never took English. I moved into the sciences. And so when I looked at writing this book, I thought, oh, I don't think I can do this on my own. And so Rick is an English major. And so I thought we could actually partner and just create a better book. So what might be interesting is finding out why Rick would even agree to do something like this.
Rick, how did Evie
Okay.
coerce you into
Well,
being
maybe I should
co-authoring?
just say something about myself first. Yeah, my name's Rick Maranta, and I own a company called Lab Rat Learning. So I do e-learning, which is pretty relevant right now. So everybody's sort of getting into e-learning, and I also some digital media and that type of stuff. But I went to a little school up the road called University of Waterloo. Ever heard of it? Yeah.
Nah.
No, both my kids went to Guelph, so that just shows you Evie has a lot of influence on our lives. So yeah. Anyways, I did my master's of English literature, and I studied self-destructive writers like William Faulkner, and so it's kind of reason why I wanted to help Evie. I just didn't want to see her crash and burn. Yeah, so I have a degree in English and sort of, but now I'm involved in education. So what interests me about working with Evie and this book is just that I like just interesting topics, right? Like in my e-learning world, I do topics like mental health and then banking and all kinds of different topics, right? And so to learn and to work with somebody who's an expert in their field is just, I think it's exciting to help someone express what they have to say, and I think it's fun, right? You don't always have to be the person out in front. Sometimes you supporting people and helping them is just great. So I thought this was exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you
that's
have to trust. I mean, the thing about a writing relationship is you have to believe this other person is going to hang in there with you. I mean, it took us years to write the first book. We wrote written two together, and you know, you've got to like this person because you're going to spend a lot of time together. And so it was helpful because Rick and I actually don't mind each other's company.
Although I was a bit worried once I was giving my comments back to Evie, they were kind of mean.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a mean editor because I kind of want to teach people the concepts rather, you know how when you were in high school they just circle something and it's like, okay, what do I do to get better? My goal was always to make people better writers on their own because that
mhm.
happened to me in university. A Professor Gosling, he just spent a lot of time going over my papers where I had lost a whole grade, and he just spent a lot of time, and I was sort of really thankful that eventually, after a long process of banging my head against it, I learned. And
Mm.
so you have to be a little mean, and then people start to get that aha moment. And I think Evie got there too. So
Yeah, I remember the first time I'm writing, and I did a lot of what was called passive writing. So, is coming instead of comes, or is going instead of goes, is taking instead of takes. So, Rick was like, passive writing really slows down the reader and it's boring. So, move to active writing. So, the one time I sent him this document and I had started out with passive writing. He goes, okay. So, he gave it a little teachable moment. Don't use passive writing. And then halfway through the document, I'd done it again. He goes, okay, like I told you, don't use passive writing. And then by the end, he goes, I told you, stop using passive writing. And I realized it was the same document. I hadn't had a chance to actually
they hadn't
get
had
the
a chance.
feedback. And then at one point, his wife was a little concerned that, he was being quite mean. And I just said, no, no, no. We're viewing this like I'm an economist. I don't take this personally. I believe in comparative and absolute advantage. He has a comparative advantage. Let's make this a better book. I
Mhm.
need you to be truthful. Like, what there's no point in pussyfooting around. I need to know what I'm doing wrong so we can make a better book. And after 3 years, I think we created a book that was really interesting given it's about the topic of economics.
Right. Just for context's sake, Evie and Martin like to hang out with Rick and his wife. So that's why his wife was concerned that he could potentially be upsetting Evie. She was worried about their social aspect of their relationship.
Yeah, whether or not we were crossing a few lines in terms of being mean and but I don't take criticism personally. I think economics kind of does that to you. I've been in enough department meetings that people just don't take things personally.
So you guys have shared a lot about that writing process. I think our listeners and viewers would like to know more about how was it once you wrote that book, the publishing process.
Oh, you want to start?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think early on when Evie had a couple of chapters done, and I think we actually had edited them to some degree, right? You,
Mhm.
you had interest in from Penguin Books. Was it Penguin? Yeah. Interest in them because you had somebody that worked there, right? And they were
Mhm.
really interested, but this was after the economic collapse of 2008, right?
Yep.
I forget all this stuff. I'm not an economics person, but all so they were really interested to have some hot book on that would explain what was going on. But this really wasn't that book, I don't think, in Evie's mind. And also, we weren't far enough along, and Evie's term was just starting. And so there's no way we could have ever got that book done. They probably wanted it within
Right.
6 months or something, right? Six or
Yeah.
4 months or right
Yeah,
away.
we and I have a day job. I was
Yeah.
teaching. We met them in January. We went to downtown Toronto. It was freezing. And yeah, they loved our title. I'll tell you, that title got a lot of interest. People thought
Hmm.
Cocktail Party Economics was a really cool title, but we hadn't written enough, and there was no way to get it. There was just no way to get it out. So they had an offer kind of on the table, but we just couldn't do it. So that kind
Hmm.
of went by the way, and then by the time we were done the book, the moment had passed. So then we decided to go through educational publishing, and so Pearson became our publisher because yeah, this book is at some level it's an educational book. Though I
Mhm.
have to say, I was reading a comment in on Chapters or Amazon or something about the book, and it said, "It's a real chick book."
Yeah.
And I went, "Oh, chick economics." And I realized it has that kinda light and fun feel to it, so it
Hmm.
doesn't feel like you're totally learning it. But I had one of my colleagues, her son was at another school, which was quite difficult, and he was taking this hard economics course that's tons of math, and he said what really helped him was reading this book because he could do the math, he just didn't understand why. And our book
Mm.
kind of describes why this
Hmm.
is an important idea. So he totally got through the course by reading our book as opposed to a textbook, which I thought was
Yeah,
a really nice
that's neat.
compliment to the book
Yes.
because it's about the ideas. It's not
Yeah.
about the math. That's not what
Yeah,
we're
and
teaching.
what helps is I think we really worked hard on analogies, so we have, Abby had a Halloween analogy, and we used golf, we used all kinds of different things to get the point across. I mean,
Hmm.
analogies only take you so far, but I think it helps in people's mind that if there's some concepts that relate to economics. So I think that helps a bit.
Yeah, I think it helps a lot because it makes it feel relevant. And partly this whole podcast series is bringing in people who graduated from Guelph. They're all alumni who are applying these big ideas in their jobs in the real world. So they're important, and
Hmm.
they might not be doing two equations, two unknowns. Like they're not doing math. They're applying economic concepts and trying to make a living at it, and very successfully doing so. So I think that I wanted to get people understanding that economics is big, big ideas, and
Hmm.
they're really important. They're not trivial. So we want to make sure we understand them.
No,
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
that's helped me too. Is one of the other reasons I really liked working with this book, because now I can look around at things that are happening. Right, currently we have COVID crisis and all this type of stuff, and it just gets me thinking about what are the implications, you know, supply,
Mhm.
demand, how they're changing societal pressures and stuff. So for me, it's fascinating to always go back and start thinking about some of these concepts, right? And I think for my two sons who went to Guelph, one of my sons took economics. I mean, I think it just helped him just be able to think through some of these things, just business concepts. So yeah,
Yeah, and your other son's an accountant.
yep, an account, yeah,
So he took accounting at
like
Guelph.
my wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, thinking about human behavior is kind of important, I think, in the real world. And this is coming at it when people make decisions that turn out to have a big economic consequence.
And lasting as well. If they make good decisions or bad, we'll be living with those consequences for many years to come.
Exactly.
So if there was a student thinking about writing a book, what piece of advice would you give them?
I don't know. You know what? I don't
Um,
know.
yeah,
Don't
you know
do
what?
it,
No, I would
or
do it.
keep on it, steady Eddie,
Yeah.
you know?
That's a good question. Like, I think first of all, if you're thinking about writing a book, you should read a couple of books on writing. Right? And two of
Mhm.
my favorites are one by Stephen King on writing, and the other is called Bird by Bird. And I think is it Anne Lamott? I'd have to look that up, but it's called Bird by Bird. And they're excellent books about how the process of writing, what it takes to be a writer. And also, one of the phrases is that you need to write 200 crappy words a day if you want to be a writer. And so the idea is you can't be a perfectionist. You got to write crappy words and then later on go back through it, because a lot of people will just take forever and then they'll just get tired. And it's just get your ideas out, and that's what Evie did. Basically, she wrote the book, and then we went over like paint, right? Painting the house, another coat, another coat, another coat until you get it right. So a lot of times,
Mhm.
I remember being in university in English, and someone was doing their master's thesis, and they were still doing it. Like um, I came in after them, and I left before them, and they were still working on their thesis because they just, were perfectionists. So I think that's good advice. And then reading from experts, other people, is great.
Also,
Mhm.
I think writing nonfiction is completely different than writing fiction. I think writing
Yeah.
fiction's harder, because, you have to create a believable story. I'm writing about what I know. I was teaching economics for more
Mhm.
than, well, I mean, at least 25 years by the time I wrote this book.
Right.
So this was like breathing for me. Like
Mhm.
I didn't have to labor over what I'm going to say. I knew what I wanted to say. It was saying in a way that was entertaining. So what Rick brought to the table is I would write a whole chapter and then he would block it with big red bubbles with comments. You know how you can do that track changes.
Mhm.
And he'd write things like, this is really boring. Why would people actually care? Or he would go, oh, you need an analogy here. This is painful, or like, I mean, when he was being mean, it was really funny. I started to laugh a lot reading his comments because they were just deadly. And
Yes.
so I think what happened is I realized in every section, you have to write something that's interesting or people don't want to read it. It can't be you just got to worry about the content. It's
Yeah.
Mhm.
how you say the content. So in our podcast, we're just being very conscious that we want this podcast to be styled in a way that is a comfortable conversation about technical things. So it needs to be fun, or people aren't going to tune into every episode and want to listen to
Mhm.
an economist and an an e-learning specialist talk to someone about free trade.
Right.
That can or cannot be interesting depending on how the conversation goes. So we're working very hard at having our guests feel very comfortable. We try to be somewhat funny, and we're not trying to, there's no sharing of a screen and up pops a graph. There's no graphs. We're just
Right.
talking, and I think that helps make the topic seem more fun, and hopefully it motivates people when they actually take economics to say, oh, I want to learn more about this because I now get why the idea is important.
Right. Like how these people went to Guelph, did economics, and now are using it in their day-to-day real life careers.
Yeah, and they are. Like, we've
Mhm.
picked people who are, and they have really interesting jobs, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. When I went back to reread your book, I really loved how you use napkins, you use quotes, you use the gossip column. Where did that come from? Because I really like the way that it breaks up the reading and provides little tidbits.
Sometimes you have what you think is a formula, like a shtick almost,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and I realized I really liked quotes, and I just thought it would be fun to try to just put them in everywhere and 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 try to show irony, because one of the things that Rick's really good at is being ironic and funny with lots of puns. So
Hmm.
part of these quotes are supposed to create humor, right? In between, chunks of text.
Right.
The gossip column, I think it's important to understand that economic ideas don't come out of nowhere, that there were people who actually thought of them. And so I really owe a huge debt to one of my colleagues, Professor Brian Ferguson, because he just knows a lot about everybody. He really is one of the most knowledgeable people I know. Um, and he knew weird things about everybody. He knows the quirky parts of their stories. And so he helped me pick the right people for every chapter. And he was the one that, looked at the concepts and said, oh, you should talk about this.
Right.
The napkin note, I had a couple of people read, a draft. And one of the admins in our department said, I really like the book, but by the time I get to the end of the chapter, I don't know what it's about. So she said, maybe it'd be really good if you just summarize what this chapter is about. And so I thought, oh, I could do a napkin and then one major point. So then Rick
Mhm.
pointed out that that's probably good teaching, right?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, it's interesting. I read this book when I was it was called How to Study in College. So it was when I was going to university, and basically the whole idea of it was to read your page, summarize it in paragraphs, and then summarize the paragraphs that you had summarized into one word or two words. So the idea is that you boil it down so that you have three different sort of expansions that you can take. And so what you've done is great. You've boiled it down to like one small phrase, right? Which
Yeah.
is
And so
really
then
helpful
people, when they
context.
come to the end of the chapter, they know, oh, that's what I was supposed to get out of this chapter.
Yeah.
I think that that
Mhm.
was, you know, uh, another part is I start every chapter with a cocktail party or a party story.
Mhm.
And so one of my sisters read the book and, she's not an economist. And I think she just started to read all the stories and then forgot their economics. So she gets to the end, she goes, so what happened to all the people? I went, what do you mean what happened to all the people? Well, there's all these people. What happens to them? And I went, oh, I'm just using it as an illustration. She goes, yeah, but I want to know what happens to them. So that's why the last chapter everybody comes back together and we find out what happened to the people because my
Okay.
sister said what happened to them because she thought that that was more interesting than the economics.
Hey, at least she read most of the book. I mean, that's pretty good.
Just the first paragraph of every
Yeah.
chapter. So it was good.
So I'm curious because we're talking about the book in its entirety. What is the biggest principle or concept that you would like students to take away from reading Cocktail Party Economics?
Hmm. I think it's that economics it's about human behavior and trying to model it. That people
Mhm.
make choices and they make choices that are reasonable. People are not irrational people. And so when you look at all the ideas, it's trying to say, oh, people made this decision because of these reasons and they're reasonable. So I think that that's what I'm trying to show is that all these concepts are just putting labels on reasonable behavior of human beings.
Right.
Yeah. And then it has real world implications, not just some big concept, right? Economics, some math thing. It's a real world application, right? That in our everyday lives, it has impact.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure. My husband and I met on campus as well, and we use a lot of terminology that we learned in economics from saying things like, "Oh, well, that's a sunk cost," and it honestly helps us just let it go and not worry about it. Or
Hmm.
thinking about, maybe a new job opportunity. What are our opportunity costs of taking it versus not? So I definitely see the terminology as it applies to rational human beings and then how it really is incorporated into our lives.
Yeah.
Did you name any of your kids by economics guys?
No, no, really just family members.
That is a very rational choice.
Yes, it is.
It's very rational to name your children after family members. It does
Mhm.
definitely endears everybody to everyone, so, that's good.
Mhm.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, our conversation's probably coming to a close here, but I think that these podcasts, what we're hoping is it creates a renewed interest in economic ideas and, that people will go, "Oh, I wanna learn more." That would be
Mhm.
great. If I can get people to listen to this and go, I want to learn more, then it's been a super successful um, podcast, basically. So we're hoping.
Fantastic. Well, Evie and Rick, thank you so much for your time. I know that the rest of the listeners and or viewers are really excited to hear the next 12 chapters. And we look forward to hearing who you have as guests.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.